The Seattle Library was one of them. I've been in it and around it.
Yeah.
It's a pretty monstrous building. It looks like a big kind of, it looks like if you were going to build a library out of Жилет Blue blades, a kind of a monstrous, hard-edged, glassy, steely heap that communicates very poorly with the street. The inside of it is organized so weirdly that, the whole idea that you get from this guy, Rem Kulhаас, is that he's striving tremendously to confound all your expectations for how a building might work or how it might be programmed for its typological use or how it might connect with the rest of the city. They're trying to confound you. And, they say that, this anarchic idea of trying to disturb the citizen over the building, and trying to upset them or defy their expectations, that's supposed to be kind of a healthy strategy. But I don't find it healthy at all. I think that people need to be oriented and comfortable in their surroundings, and the buildings need to inform them about where they are and who they are and where they're going and what they're doing. For example, in the Seattle Library, he's got some things like staircases that actually get smaller as you go up the stairs, like the psychotic buildings in that German expressionist movie, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Or also the Remington house or whatever, right? That haunted house where the crazy widow just built stairways and doors that didn't lead.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's kind of an oddity in California, yeah.
The Winchester house.
But his buildings are designed to disturb and confound your expectations. And, I came to the conclusion that the more they confounded you and defied your expectations about how things would work, the more they would be elevated to the level of supernatural geniuses, because you couldn't figure them out and you couldn't figure out the buildings that they delivered. So this is all in the service of grandiosity and narcissism and making them appear to be something that they weren't, which was, supernatural wizards. We don't need supernatural wizards. We need competent architects who will give us buildings that are neurologically comprehensible, that satisfy our needs for orientation, and that satisfy our perhaps even deeper needs for cultural orientation, to know who we are, what culture we're in, and what's going on in it.
Did these people even know how to do urbanism, though, or are they just bluffing? Like, didn't Frank Lloyd Wright say that he doesn't understand cities, he can't build?
Frank Lloyd Wright didn't like cities.
Yeah.
He had an antipathy to cities, as did Corbusier, the French father of the idea of the tower in a park, which ended up, of course, being the tower amongst the freeways. And he wanted to, Corbu wanted to demolish, half of the right bank of Paris and put up what would have looked like a New York City housing project. Anyway, Kulhаас is in that tradition, and the whole ideology of the modern movement, so-called, has really maintained its mission from the very beginning, which at the early in the early 20th century, their mission became defined partially as confounding the expectations of the bourgeoisie and to stick it to the bourgeoisie. It included this hatred of the successful middle classes and this desire to injure them and confound them, for the sake of becoming separate from the middle class as artists. Of creating a barrier between the heroism of the lone, tortured, artistic soul, as opposed to the sordidness of the bourgeois, acquisitive, money-grubbing, shop owner, who want to buy a painting. So this great sort of cleavage occurred between bohemianism and sort of people who represented success in society. And that has just continued with the programming of the ideology for the last 100 years. And, it's maintained rigorously by the mandarins of the architecture schools.
I'm wondering, my question, I guess, is when cities have the opportunity to create something new, it seems like they either make it a cartoon or some futuristic box that is kind of screaming for attention. And I'm wondering, why is it that people are not interested in building classic buildings that blend in? So if you could help me understand this a little better, I would really appreciate it. Thanks so much, guys.
Jim, have you seen these things in person? I've actually seen these buildings in person.
I've seen and been in the Seattle Public Library designed by Rem Kulhаас.
Yeah.
And, it's not that hard to understand what's going on. The city officials are not that sophisticated. They're probably not stupid, but basically what they're hoodwinked into is a kind of a fashion contest with other cities, a status fashion contest. And the big status symbol for the last 20 years has been, to get a museum or a library designed by one of a certain roster of star architects, or starchitects as they're called. And, it's a revolving door of Frank Gehry, Rem Kulhаас, Peter Eisenman, a bunch of other people. The results have been disastrous for, practically every place has done this. The case of the Seattle Library is interesting. Yeah, it is a building that is intimidating, and the inside of it is an interesting thing because it completely disorients you. You go up these stairways that are designed to make you feel disoriented and to not really particularly lead to a place that you understand. And the ideology of academic architecture these days is based on the wish to confound our expectations about how buildings will work and about how cities will work and how the buildings will relate to the cities. So, the program with Rem Kulhаас, and he states this explicitly in his own writings, is to confuse the person using the building and create as much anxiety as possible in the users and to mystify them. And the whole object of this whole exercise is to make the architects seem more supernaturally brilliant for having created all this mystification. The more mystification they create, the more it supposedly means that they know things that you don't.
All right, Jim, but what I don't understand is not only have these guys like Kulhаас, conned all the mayors of these cities around the world, but the American Institute of Architects is giving this guy awards. He got an award for this public library, which looks like a droid transport carrier out of a George Lucas film.
All the big architecture prizes are going to these horrendous, despotic, high-tech buildings that look like they're constructed out of Жилет Blue blades or, some other really frightening material. It is a con game, and it's also a game of the emperor's new clothes. These guys are all trying to support an ideology which says, in essence, the more we can mystify the public, the more brilliant we will appear to be.
Yeah, it's
one of for a few thousand years has been to reassure us that when we're in a city, we're in a place that is safe, that in which transactions occur that we can understand, that we're in surroundings that are coherent, that the outsides of the buildings embellish the public realm and honor the public realm and honor our presence in the public realm by speaking to us in languages and vocabularies and syntaxes and grammars and rhythms and patterns that we understand from our own culture. So when you bring into that setting this effort to mystify and confuse everybody and create deliberately more anxiety, you're doing a real disservice not only to the individual people who inhabit the polis, but to the idea of civic life as a general proposition.
I want to get back to this emperor has no clothes idea because I think you nailed it.
That's not an original thought on my part, by the way, Duncan.
Oh, you're so
I mean, there are a lot of people who are on to the emperor's new clothes element of this racket.
Well, there's a reporter I happen to really enjoy his writing, but he was writing about my hometown, Troy, and I think he suffered from the emperor had no clothes situation with this MPAC building. Now, you were speaking at RPI recently. Did you see this thing? It's a galactic battle star.
Yeah, it's the mother ship. And the tragic thing about it is that the Rensselaer Polytechnic campus is one of the more coherent ensembles of buildings in the United States, of urban college campuses. It's, most of it is a Beaux-Arts period, Greco-Roman sort of neoclassical ensemble of buildings, very handsome, very orderly, creates a sense of coherence and order, which helps young people who are, struggling to develop a point of view about the world and to feel that their existence has purpose and order. So, being in these settings actually is enhanced by being surrounded by things that reflect a certain amount of coherence. And into this, they've now introduced this kind of mothership UFO. And but it's perfectly consistent with the trend of what's gone on in every campus and every city in America.
But Jim, this campus happens to be perched on top of a hill, so it's the skyline of my city, and now they're blasting these green and red lights on it at night. Like, oh, look at this thing! It's totally...
it's like if you were going to put on a clown suit and jump up and down on the highest part of your city and point at yourself and say, look at me, I'm special.
But they have a school of architecture at RPI. What are architects actually learning in school?
By the way, we should now have a Special Olympics for architects, so they can jump up and down in their clown suits and be as special as they want. Yeah, it's tragic. RPI, of course, is not really a special case. You can probably count on one hand the architecture schools around the country that are actually teaching, something that has a future. Most of them are pretty much stuck in the fashionista / mystification racket. And RPI, unfortunately, is one of them, although they have heavier emphasis on just some of the technical considerations, like, these claddings that are made out of, rare metals like titanium, which are an unbelievable squandering of resources. And they're really into a lot of the high-tech stuff. Many of the buildings that are getting these awards from the architecture societies and the Pritzker Prize and all that, they're doing it by dabbling in high-tech-ism. It's not necessarily anything really wonderful about cladding a building with titanium from a technical point of view. It doesn't improve the insulating or heating properties or air conditioning properties. It's just a stunt, really.
Jim, you lecture all around the country, and you do speak.
I actually call it flapping my gums.
But you do speak at some. You've spoken at architectural institutes and things like that. Right?
Yeah, I've been to many of the biggies.
So, have you talked to these architects? What the hell are they learning in school? Do they apologize to you when they hear you, or do they argue with you?
Oh, no, they argue with me strenuously, especially at the more elite universities. I've been to Harvard, 3 or 4 times, and, they think that this is a joke, that I'm complaining about it, because they think that mystification is wonderful.
Yeah.
It makes them feel more superior. So they're totally along with that program, and they're certainly prompted and supported in it by their professors, who also get a huge lift out of feeling like superior supernatural beings from another planet because they've succeeded in mystifying people and making them feel uncomfortable in the buildings that they have to go to every day. Mm. Another interesting case, by the way, is MIT, which is down the street from Harvard. And they were gifted with the famous Frank Gehry building known as the Stata Center, which is a kind of a classroom complex. It was supposed to be the centerpiece of their, quote, new Main Street, which is called Vassar Street off of Mass Avenue. The building's only been open for about 2 years, and they've already incurred something like $100 million lawsuit because the roof doesn't work, and the way that the entrances were designed, they were perfectly designed to direct large pieces of ice to fall on the heads of people on the sidewalk, as if they couldn't have predicted that from these steel shed channelized roofs that they have over the entrances. And so they're in a lot of trouble with that. They're going to probably have to do a lot of costly retrofitting. The inside of the building, by the way, doesn't work very well for the people who work there because there were all these glass walls where people wanted to have private offices, so they could sit in there and, drink their coffee and be alone and not be bothered. And instead, they got glass walls for all their offices. And, they would be taking corrugated cardboard cartons, that the computers came in and taping them to the walls, the glass walls of their office so that they could have some privacy. So the whole thing was sort of a fiasco, in spite of the fact that, it's a playful building and, it looks cute on the outside on one side. Um, and the whole issue with Vassar Street too has gotten very funny because most of the buildings along Vassar Street now at ground level actually present the heat, air conditioning, exhaust vents at eyebrow level, so that when you're going by, you get blasted with either hot air or cold air.